Well, buenas tardes, guten Abend, and other greetings to everyone. It's evening, which means it's time for European news. And let's immediately see how the residents of one of the German cities gratefully welcomed Pachtapachtagi Nozemerts after his return from vacation. Let me remind you that, oh well, let's just watch right away. Here he is, the wonderful leader of a powerful state. And behind him are grateful listeners with posters, which are actually against him. Listen to how the happy spectators are booing him, and behind him, the rest of the Germans are smiling skeptically. Well, almost all of them.
To see what we can learn from this together. First of all, I really want to sincerely thank the emergency personnel, and I already had the opportunity to do just that.
But let me remind you that at first he talked about the need to work harder and prepare for tough times, and to tighten our belts. And then after saying that Germans need to work harder, he just went on vacation for a month. Well, they're ordinary people, and then there are counts and princes who rule countries. Apparently Merz, like some other leaders, considers himself one of those. And besides Germany, I've already talked more than once about the economy of Europe and Germany. Nevertheless, what are they doing there? Instead of coordinating with businesses, coming up with some plans, finding a strategy for developing the economy, which is actually declining sharply. Germany intends to create a missile arsenal worth 12 billion euros. That's a very necessary move, a very necessary one. And what's most interesting is that they're also going to buy flamingos, those very ones that don't even exist yet, which they seem to be planning to produce, or maybe not. They're planning to produce them in Ukraine, and Germany is planning to buy these flamingos. Well, that's extremely strange. The German government, in order to deter Russia, plans to create a new arsenal of long-range weapons capable of hitting targets at distances of hundreds or even thousands of kilometers. According to departmental documents, the goal of the project is to provide the German armed forces with the ability to strike deep behind enemy lines, including command posts, airfields, and launchers. In general, everything is being done just as before, and it's unclear what happened to the rest of the weaponry that existed previously. Either it was scrapped for metal, so to speak, or it broke down, or something else happened. It's unclear. Write in the comments what you think about this. The German government expects that creating a new missile arsenal will require almost 12 billion euros. The funding has not been approved yet, but one of the documents states that the expenses have already been calculated and presented as part of the government's budget planning process. And it turns out this is a top priority for Germany. So the economy, forget about it. Social spending, forget about that too. Let it all go to hell. But missiles are what will help the country get through tough times. Well, I mean, not the people. Forget about the people, but the rulers. And this trend isn't just in Germany, but in many other, though not all, European countries as well, not to mention the CIS. That's where this whole situation has really unfolded, where the lords are fighting and it's the common folk who end up suffering. So, Germany is negotiating to purchase Ukrainian Flamingo missiles. First, Berlin intends to buy inexpensive cruise missiles, which are expected to be delivered next year, and then buy something or other from the UK, then some other missiles and more, and sign contracts, and everything is just fine. So it will happen after all, and they say the lesson was learned from Russia's war against Ukraine, plus they'll buy a Agavki there, and basically they'll buy everything. In short, well, you just can't break them. You can't break Europe. That's just amazing. While they're buying non-existent flamingos and carrying out protests, and interestingly other strategic plans, not tactical but specifically strategic, they're also planning to help Ukraine with 60 million euros. Johann Wadefull, during his visit to Kiev, he actually went to Kiev, by the way, as I mentioned earlier. I'll tell you again that he arrived in Kiev a few days before Independence Day. That's very powerful, very significant, and overall just wonderful. When Ukraine, as mentioned in Wadefull's address, marking the 35th anniversary of its independence, for me personally, says Wadefull, it is very important to see the situation on the ground with my own eyes and to talk to as many people as possible who are in different life circumstances. So, seriously, a high-ranking official comes to another country and he seriously thinks that he will talk to everyone. He will talk to those whom, frankly speaking, he is allowed to talk to.
They will place people at the right spots on the streets, prepare some characters who will shout, "Hooray, Zelensky! Hooray, Neslamnist!"
Hooray to the Nafrin. We all want to go to the front here and there. They won't let him quietly go talk at some school. They won't send him to a camp where people are rotting. They won't send him to the basements of the territorial recruitment centers where he could also talk to those who aren't interested in the war. They won't send him anywhere. They just won't send him anywhere. He'll be talking to some slick characters, the mothers, brothers, in-laws, and godfathers of all those powerful leaders. Naturally, they'll create the picture they want. But there are also some rather interesting people, and apparently, as a result of all this, now 60 million euros are being allocated.
50 million euros are being sent to UN institutions, an extremely powerful organization that is always expressing confusion and concern.
Non-governmental organizations that provide support to the people of Ukraine. It's also interesting who in Ukraine actually received this support. And 10 million are being transferred to the NATO fund, whose resources are allocated, among other things, for fuel supplies, medical equipment, and systems for protection against drones.
Extremely rational use of funds. In my opinion, this is simply ideal. It's the quintessence of rational budget management.
Well, that's magnificent. Efficient managers, they're everywhere and always around.
Sibir met with one powerful leader, then another. One had a smaller jacket, the other a bigger one. And everyone here had a very powerful conversation.
And this very person on the left talked to the person on the right and told him that Germany helped us get through last winter. And after today's conversation, I'm sure we can count on support this coming winter. But that's even though Germany itself doesn't have enough gas. They also explain here why there's not enough gas. I don't know how those who need help themselves will be able to help. But still, gas storage facilities in Germany, I know you're tired of hearing about them from me, but they're just setting records for inefficiency here. Their only field to 50% traders are waiting for wholesale prices to drop if the war in Iran ends, but it just keeps going and going, which apparently isn't very good for the traders. If you want to take a break from politics, I have another channel you might like. It's called Americans Were on the Moon. It's a science channel where we fight against obscurantism, all sorts of Anunnaki, reality transurfing, and other so-called contactees. And we also discuss that unfortunate flat Earth theory. We talk about those chemtrails too. Plus, there are also quite scientific and popular science materials about what's on Earth and what's in space. About searching for something in Antarctica, about how Musk's rocket crashed into the moon. And today, for example, I published information that something might explode in the US. So, in general, subscribe.
It's extremely interesting there.
How full are the storage facilities now? 40 storage facilities in Germany are just over half full.
According to Gas Infrastructure, the Industry Association of European Gas Network Operators, the occupancy rate was 50%. This is the lowest figure in many years.
Gas reserves are about 25% lower than on the same date last year, and more than 45% lower than in 2023 and 2024. And these people are going to help Ukraine get through the winter. But if you can't handle your own winters, how can you help with this? Well, this is where the situation is being analyzed. Why is the storage level so low? First of all, operators have no incentive because of high prices. It seems like they're supposed to go down. European wholesale gas prices are still above pre-war levels.
The price is 65 euros per minute gigawatt hour, which is about twice as high as during the same period last year.
And the reason is the war between the US and Iran, which Doni started very successfully at a very convenient time. Germany now relies heavily on private energy trading companies. Market participants are betting on a drop in gas prices in the next few months if the war with Iran ends. But they also have to compete with Asia in Europe. Asia is a huge consumer of energy resources, and Asia offers good prices. Things are relatively good in Asia for now. That's why the gas that was originally meant for Europe might start being actively pumped into China's gas storage facilities. And politicians accuse traders of speculating on Germany's energy security, including a member of parliament. Well, after that, there were disputes between them.
And what about other countries? The storage facilities in the Netherlands, Belgium, Slovakia, Sweden, and Latvia also do not exceed 50% capacity. As of August 19, the average level was 61%. This fill level is 17 points lower than last year. Overall, it's not very good. Can Germany store enough gas? Well, some say yes, there's no problem. Others say that the gas supply might be at risk. And how will the gas shortage affect winter prices? Well, listen, naturally prices will go up. In many places they've already increased by 30%. Of course, they'll keep rising. I don't even know why journalists write such articles. Because it's obvious that prices will go up. And how will the government and Europe help their citizens? Well, for example, in other countries, not just in Germany. Paying for U.S. military bases, well, I think that's already beyond the bounds of intellectual decency, let's say, for different categories of the population. Everyone already understands that something is going in the wrong direction, completely in the wrong direction. Eastern Europe, we're told, will help the U.S. reduce spending on military bases, but obviously the U.S. is the poorest country. That's why it needs help. Countries on NATO's eastern flank want to lobby in Washington against reducing the military contingent in the region, and they intend to propose measures to reduce U.S. spending on maintaining military bases. And that's just wonderful. The relevant proposals should be prepared by August 27, the day when representatives of the North Atlantic Alliance will meet with the U.S. Deputy Secretary of Defense in Brussels. Amid all the negotiations, it is necessary to find a way to maintain a credible deterrent in relations with Russia. Again, 12 billion for missiles, 60 million in Ukraine, and some more for those bases. Let's take a look at how much money is needed here. In Europe, we're told there are between 80,000 and 100,000 American troops stationed. In the Baltic countries, there are a few hundred. Well, that's about all that can fit there, really. In Poland, there are a few thousand. And the US said that, supposedly, they don't want to spend. They're going to start withdrawing their forces now. From Europe, because they need those soldiers and officers themselves. And in the end, this is what we get. So, what do you think about that? Europe, on one hand, is already drowning in debt. On the other hand, they keep throwing money around. There was a Sunday king in France. He practically destroyed his country's budget, spending on all sorts of extravagant things, including dresses for his favorites and so on. And he started changing finance ministers. And one of the finance ministers said, you know what, dear monsieur, well, how should I address your excellency? Or however they addressed each other. In order for other countries to trust us with loans, we need to spend more. They will instantly believe that we have plenty of money and decide that it's safe to lend us money. They'd already scraped together every last penny, and then it turned out that other countries were well aware that France actually didn't have any money. No one gave any money. Well, and the finance minister was fired. He should be thankful they didn't execute him, of course. And I think that finance ministers in many countries today are acting in pretty much the same way. All of this seems very suspicious to me. And then there's another interesting piece of news about migrants. Now, people are starting to realize what's happening and pay attention, although it's already too late, really. For example, in Germany, I read some news about this just yesterday. There are 4 extremely powerful Syrian mafia groups, and nothing can be done about them. Because with the resources that Germany has, the police and everything else, well, nothing can be done. These guys use very tough methods, and of course, they were accepted as refugees. Remember those boats back in, what was it, 2013 or 2014? When they showed men with shoulders like this, with big biceps, and said, oh, with tattoos, with thick beards. They said, look, these are refugees, starving people coming to us. Well, they came, they got what they wanted. Wonderful. And now they're panicking after the fact. They're only now starting to throw punches. And first of all, in different countries, they want to send all these people back to Italy. Valuable specialists. Well, as always, neurosurgeons, physicists, auto mechanics, marine geology experts, you see, they're now studying the situation with Horst and Graben. There, in that marine location? Well, and in order not to have even more of them, because there are already a lot of geologists and institutes, they're planning to send them back to the Apennines, to Italy. Why? Because Italy is largely the first place where all these valuable specialists applied for asylum. That's what Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Finland, and now Sweden are planning to do and are already doing.
She confirmed to the Italian news agency ANSA that she intends to apply the rules as established. These rules are provided for by the EU Pact on Migration and Asylum. It came into force on June 12th, and accordingly, Italy now is apparently obliged to accept all valuable specialists in order to either pay them or send them back. Spain and France, which are in a similar situation. Recently, for example, in Spain, in Cartagena, an illegal ship with illegal migrants docked. They immediately scattered, and only 2 or 3 people out of dozens were caught. And, of course, all of them then apply for asylum. And now Spain and France don't want all these scientists, poets, and powerful social specialists to be sent back to them. And right now it's still unclear what's going on between Rome and Madrid regarding Schengen. It seems like Italy promised to close its borders but apparently didn't. But who exactly are the people covered by the Dublin rules mentioned in the article? These are migrants who arrived in Europe seeking asylum. They are required to apply for asylum in the very first European country they arrive in. And 2 years Rome received 109,000 requests for the transfer of such individuals. Italy became the country that received the most requests for the return of these very specialists. More than 24,000, 14,000 involved Germany and France. But there are still 10,000 unresolved cases that need to be addressed. Here again, Switzerland stands out. It has 3,000 requests. And Italy doesn't want to receive scientists and writers because, well, there are just too many of them. And it says that Italy refuses to accept the transferred individuals. And from June 12 to July 7, the country has already rejected 12 such transfers. Just imagine the back and forth, the man-hours spent on all that coordination. On returns, on deportations, it all costs money. Can you imagine how much money is spent on, say, those same 100,000 transfers? For each one, I'm sure you have to spend several thousand euros. And of course, where does this money come from? From taxes and taxpayers' money, and there aren't that many taxpayers left in Europe anyway, because the finances are in bad shape. But that's just great. They continue to operate. The political reaction to Crimea. The crisis is being fueled. Now there are already disputes within. And they call it the deafening boomerang of Giorgia Meloni's propaganda stunt. Because of this, her critics call her exactly a blind ideological propagandist. They did not take up the most important fight that should have been waged in Brussels, critics tell us, in the national interest for European solidarity, including in the area of accepting migrants. Deportation works, but against us. And there is no connection between the suspension of the Schengen Agreement because of the events in Ceuta and the legitimate choice of some European countries to resume Dublin transfers. That's how it is. Everything is great in Europe. Goodbye, everyone.